Hours call for the VMware Cloud on AWS customer success team. Joining me so far on the call, we have Double Z, Asaf, and Fabio, all braving today's corona outbreaks. And we have Darren and Donal online as well. Thank you guys for joining. We will just give it 30 seconds for more people to join in. As per usual, if you are watching this on Zoom, on YouTube later on, and we don't cover the things you want us to cover, please feel free to add a comment. We've had a few subscribers of late, so thank you for joining and subscribing to the channel. If you're watching this live on Zoom, please feel free to use the Q&A or chat boxes, and again, if you're watching on Twitch, please feel free to to add your questions to the Twitch chat panel as well. So let's have a look who we got. Right, so yeah, it is the 10th of March. I should know the date as it's my birthday today. I couldn't take the day off because, well, you know, who would want to when you work on such fantastic technology as this? So, without further ado, what I wanted to do today is to just kind of cover off a few things that have been brought up again of late, things we've discussed in the past. So apologies if you're hearing some of this stuff again, but I think every now and again it's worth going over stuff, especially for folks that are new to the channel or new to the recordings on YouTube. So let me just see who we have as well. Anybody new? Hi, Angeline and David. Thanks for joining. So one of the things I keep getting asked about of late is Enterprise Federation and the ability to control access to both the Cloud Service Portal and vCenter, and then hook them into your current directory services. So I thought I would just dig into that one a little bit more as we've done in the past, but maybe there are some fresh questions come up. You guys on mute, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions or just jump in as and when. And if my fellow architects, if you want to jump in with additional information, again, feel free as well. So what I'll do is I'll just give you a very quick overview of kind of how Enterprise Federation works once we've set it up, and actually how when you log in now to the Cloud Service Portal it works, and then how it works with Enterprise Federation setup. So so as you guys all know, you currently need a My VMware ID to log in. So here we have the Cloud Service Portal, or console.cloud.vmware.com. And when you log in there, you log in with your email address, and then what happens is that goes off here, and you get authenticated against a VIDM tenant for your VMware or My VMware ID, and that goes off to our Oracle database, checks it, and then allows you through if you're recognized. Now we support a number of different third-party directory services, like, as you can see on the screen, Okta and Ping Identity, Azure AD and ADFS being two others, as well as obviously on-premises Active Directory. So, so the way this works, it's not 100% automated at the moment. It's a bit of a white glove thing as we just work through setting this up. And it's worth calling out as well, actually, that although you may have, say, Workspace ONE at the moment and maybe already using an identity service like VIDM for Workspace ONE and some desktop services through us, currently you need a secondary tenant for this. So it is a standalone new version of the IDM setup that you need to do in order to hook it into your Cloud Service Portal. And there is, as I've mentioned previously, a roadmap to integrate this. So if you have Workspace ONE at the moment, then in the future, and I don't know roughly the time frame for that, somebody else can jump in if they know, but the plan is obviously to integrate so you only have a single sort of identity tenant, and then your hook into AD or whatever will be just one clean setup for everything that you have from us. Does anybody?
Yeah, it's supposed to be integrated with the CSP, so it will be self-service.
Yes. So there's two
Um,
sides to it, right? Thanks, Zach. So there's self-service to request it, and then also hooked in if you already have it. So at the moment, because of the manual setup required from our SRE guys and from somebody in, say, customer success or GSS to help you, um, uh, the setup's a bit bitty, if that makes sense. There's a bit of manual intervention. So there's the automated side that Zach's just hinted at, and then there's also the streamlined, so that you only need one version of this. So as you see on screen now, once we set the process up, when you come in with your My VMware ID, instead of it going off to our tenant, you have a tenant created for you. Um, so if that was will.com, for example, I would log in with my VMware ID, will@will.com. It would recognize that actually I've had a tenant created for me, a VIDM tenant, which is just for me for will.com. Um, I go off to a connector that we deploy on-prem. Some interesting things about the connector here as well. So originally, we used to allow an appliance to be deployed, which makes sense. Like for everything else we do, we've gone down the appliance route, especially if it's running on our own OS version. Um, we'd noticed a few issues in the past. Sort of Linux and AD don't always play together all that well. So we've kind of reverted to this connector here needing to be installed in a Windows VM if you're going against AD. And I think that's the route it's going to take for any directory service. So you'd have a requirement to deploy a Windows VM for this connector on-prem, and that then connects to your AD. And it's an outbound auth kind of thing. So we're not reaching in to your network every time you need to log in. We've done a sync via the connector, and you control access a number of different ways, but primarily through um, what attributes somebody has on their directory service account. So, for example, in AD, you normally have a number of default attributes like first name, surname, email, and AD username. You might create a new attribute, or you might have an attribute that says cloud only or something, and then you tick that. Then only accounts with cloud only attribute synced would be able to log in, if that makes sense. Stop me if I'm firing ahead too fast, or if you do have any questions on this. Anything so far? Nope. Good. Okay. Um, so once that connector's been set up and you've performed the first sync, then the next time you log in, it will see that information, and then that is your on-prem AD synced to your tenant. However, if you're using a third-party directory services like the ones you see there, like Okta or Ping Identity, because we've already performed the sync, you need to perform some additional work on-prem. So you need to go back into, so I say on-prem, in your directory service like Okta or Ping, you'd need to go in and make some configuration changes. And there is a community site where I'll bring that up in a minute that shows you all of the necessary changes you'd need to make. It's different for each service. So, for example, ADFS is different than Okta and different from Ping, and we have configuration options for all of those. So we can it's published already, and I guess the number of those is growing day by day too. So if the directory service you're currently using isn't there, I'd be surprised if it isn't there, but if it isn't, reach out to us and we can check how far down the path we are with that one. I don't know if any of you guys, any of the other architects online, know of any other directory services outside of the ones we typically use, um, or typically see in the out there in the wild. Anybody?
I've just seen ping for both of my customers I set up.
Yeah, there's not there isn't a huge number of them, to be fair, that are mainly used. I was just seeing if I could bring the link up quickly. Oh, here we go. I shall
I
bring
think
this up.
you could use Azure has its own.
Yeah, so we've got ADFS, Azure AD, CA CloudMinder, Centrify, F5 Big IP, Google Okta. There's quite a few, and we've got all the configuration information here. So, like I said, you need to make a few changes in your configuration. So, for example, if we look at Azure AD, for example, one I've just worked on recently, there's a number of things you need to go into here and make changes. And we've published, a really helpful guide as to what needs changing, what you need to what links to what and which information you need to edit or put in, and it's relatively straightforward at this stage. But I've no doubt that there will be new identity services that people use, something weird and wonderful come out. And if we haven't created this, again, do reach out to us, and we can always update the place this lives. But if you want to just take a note of that, I'll leave that on screen for a few minutes while we carry on talking. But it's a relatively straightforward thing. The reality is it takes about 20 minutes of actual work to set this up, but in the real world it probably takes a few days because there'll be change request approvals to go through for changing stuff on prem or in your directory services, and then on our side of things, because we need to involve the SRE teams to create, for example, a new VIDM tenant, we need to kind of log a call and get that set up. So we need a bit of back and forth time, really. So I think the quickest I've seen it done is about a day and a half of expended time, but again, about 20 to 30 minutes of actual effort involved. So not too difficult. Ruth, you came off mute there. Did you have a question at all, or were you just
No, sorry.
preparing?
Just preparing. So eager.
No worries. Okay, cool. So I will just flick back to that image quickly. Um, so yeah, once that initial sync has been set up and you've created your connection to your third-party IDP, you can then go through and set up MFA as well, so multi-factor authentication. Now the list, I don't know how up to date our list is, but the one I was looking at earlier was quite a small amount of MFAs. Now again, the guys online, you can keep me honest, but I believe it's only kind of Google Authenticator or Duo Mobile as the multi-factor authenticator. I don't know of any others that we currently offer for MFAs. No, anything above that. I think in our most recent documentation from middle of next year, maybe RSA is now in there. I've not seen the updated docs though.
I think Ping isn't Ping. Ping has MFA.
So Ping's got one built in, as does
Yeah.
Azure AD has one built in as well, I believe. But as in
Mm,
a secondary sort of two-factor
mm,
authentication, I think I've only
yeah.
seen Google Authenticator and Duo Mobile.
Mm,
But again, you can, if any of you need to dig in, if you actually just go to the cloud service product documentation pages on docs.vmware.com and search for MFA, you'll find the two-factor authentication application use list, I think.
mhm.
Yeah, just to add to that, there was a native MFA feature within CSP
Yeah,
which only supports those two options. But the MFA options through this Enterprise Federation, I think we have a larger range of supported
yeah, which is
options.
I think where sort of the RSA and others come into play, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Other third parties as well. Yeah.
cool. If any of my colleagues online can dig out a list of stuff and ping it over to me during the call, that'd be useful, and then we can just show that up as well at some point, or I'll just add it to the comment section on YouTube later on. But cool. So yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward as far as setting up Enterprise Federation goes. Now that's one side of it. Okay, so that is access and federating access to the cloud service portal. Now, not everybody actually allows their team to go into the cloud service portal to manage things. Obviously, it's the place where all of the network and security config has to happen, but not all VI admins will allow everybody that requires access to, say, deploy VMs, will allow them into CSP. So there's quite often sort of two places where we control access, and one is the cloud service portal, and the other is within vCenter itself. And there's a number of different ways of setting up the AD connectivity. Anybody want to go into any lists or any known issues with setting up sort of AD hooking that's different maybe to how people use it on-prem?
Uh,
It's the
y-
cloud gateway.
Yeah, Cloud Gateway's one.
Um, Other than that, I think it's just to set up like LDAP is pretty similar.
Yeah. So are you aware of any challenges or issues with Cloud Gateway or like hybrid link mode through setups? I mean, any sort of experience of doing that for yourself? Anybody online, Zach or Prasanna, or anybody?
I hadn't set it up in a while, but the Cloud Gateway appliance before was a little unwieldy.
Yeah.
It didn't have like a clean removal process. So in our lab, we're always changing STDCs because we redeploy to get the latest versions, because we don't get upgraded because
Yeah, unlike
we don't pay.
you lucky customers that pay money, we
Yeah.
get sort of the EA unsupported versions. So every time there's a new release, we have to go and smash through our lab and redeploy it, which is why you'll often see in our lab, you'll see things like this EA version 2 and stuff where we've deployed the latest early access version so we can have a play in there. And then yeah, we have to go and delete that all and start again. So there's things like mob references are left over, aren't they, and various other things that if you want to uninstall it, it's not 100% clean. Cool. So operationally speaking, are there any challenges or issues anybody's aware of when it comes to either granting or managing permissions to CSP or to vCenter that's different with, well, certainly vCenter that's different from on-prem with VMC and just CSP in general?
Maybe a couple of quick callouts on some of the considerations.
Yeah.
So this enterprise federation feature is not linked with a specific SDDC or even a specific org. So it's a domain name wide decision. So basically, whenever a customer logs into a CSP and it matches a specific domain name of choice, then this enterprise federation is applied for that particular domain. So it doesn't matter whether you have multiple orgs or multiple SDDCs.
That is a very good point, Prasanna. So, so basically, whenever I log in here, and all of my services that are offered to me, they are then all going to be controlled. All my rights and permissions are all going to be controlled from my federated identity, correct? So if I
That's
haven't
correct. Yeah.
set up certain stuff to allow me into one or the other, I'm either going to have access to everything or access to nothing, regardless how how it's set up. So that's a really good point. It's not just VMware Cloud on AWS federated identity; it is Cloud Service Portal federated identity. So yeah, good point. Anything else?
Yeah, and
yeah, well, sorry, PJ, go ahead.
okay, yeah, I'll just finish this quickly. So the connector, which is used to sync the AD groups with the VADM tenant.
Yeah.
So that is always required in case of VMC.
Yes.
Because there are connectorless options which are available for the on-prem version, but VMC always needs a connector.
Absolutely, yeah. So and again, it has to be a Windows connector now, so Windows VM, which kind of is a little bit painful for customers that are non-Windows shops, of which there are a number, right? But yeah, good point.
Yeah, please go ahead, Fabio.
Fabio, you had a point as well, mate.
Yeah, we are just talking about how to implement and to deploy the configuration, but another important stuff is just that if a customer needs to disconnect, so need to come back to a normal configuration without any kind of integration, be really careful doing that, because I got a customer that have deleted the connector, and so everything has started to go really wrong, and it's hard to recover from that kind of configuration, because if the customer don't do the correct steps, so work with us, with the support team, to change the configuration and remove the configuration of the identity provider, would become really a nightmare to recover from that kind of situation. So if for any reason someone need to go back to a normal access configurations to a normal identity provider with my VMware account, please be really careful on the step that you're doing, because it's easy to have big trouble while just removing that. So this is another important point.
Yeah, no, it is a good point, a really important point, that if you don't just go up there and delete stuff. If you think, oh, I'm not going to use this anymore, I'm going to just I'm going to revert to how I was before and just log in with my VMware ID. Yeah, absolutely. That'll. How many hours do you reckon that's taken to work through?
We are still working since over 1 week on that to restore the configuration and to fix that. So there are several workarounds, but actually we didn't have a clean setup after 1 week. So yeah, it's painful.
Yeah, so yeah, it just highlights. And is the process to remove, do you reckon that's documented, or documented enough, or there's no documentation for that?
There are not lots of documentation. Actually, if the customer need to remove the integration, need to talk with us and with the support, and there are several configurations that must be made also from our engineering. So it's something that the customer could not be by himself. So we need to work with the customer and ensure that everything is done correctly, following the direction of the support. So there are not lots of documentation on that, honestly speaking.
Well, maybe that's something we can remedy, and we can work with GSS and maybe write a KB article that just highlights the fact that it's a multi-step process and they need to engage support if they want to revert back to a standard My VMware ID based login. And we'll get that published,
for sure,
as quick as we can, I guess. Cool. Now, I've seen a few extra people join. René Francois, Annabella, and Claire, thanks for joining. I've had nothing new come up actually this week. I've been working on a number of things. That's a lie. There is something new that's come up, and I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks back we talked about configuration maximums, one of my favorite topics of ever. And how there was a soft limit of 16 hosts per cluster, which I've highlighted here. You'll notice the word soft limit has now disappeared from this. We finally managed to get the documentation updated. This is no longer a soft limit per cluster. This is now a maximum limit, and I'm not calling it a hard limit for a number of reasons, which I'll go into in a sec. But you are no longer allowed to provision more than 16 hosts in a cluster. Even if you can, you will breach your SLA and you'll be in a kind of a weird, not unsupported, but you won't be under SLA support if you have more than 16 nodes in your cluster. Now, there is a scenario where you may end up with more than 16 nodes in your cluster. And this is if you had 16 nodes in your cluster, whether it be stretched or single AZ, and you breach the storage 70% marker, an autoscaler, or either the other performance metrics. If you've got EDRS enabled for everything, an autoscaler kicks in and provisions you more hosts. Now, at the moment, that still happens. You're still autoscaler will still sort of provision you more hosts, and there's kind of a 50% solid reason for that and a 50% black hole reason. So kind of allows you to provision more hosts through autoscaler because it will keep you in a performant manner. So if you have enough IP addresses ranged in your CIDR range, your management CIDR, and you breach one of your EDRS rules and you get autoscaler kicking in, it will give you 1 or 2 hosts depending on your cluster type. However, you kind of need to be looking at that immediately and reducing whatever it is that's caused you to go above the 16 node limit. So this is where customer success can help you, but I would imagine that you'll be getting emails from the SRE guys as well, letting you know that you've gone over that. But it's definitely one to watch out for. Is if you are starting to get anywhere close to any of the 3 limits on CPU, memory, or storage, that you need to start thinking about provisioning another cluster to handle the workloads. And there are features coming that will enable a more seamless set of management for that. So like, is it? I think it was called cross-cluster scale-out. Was that the terminology, people?
Something like that.
Yeah. So that'll
Cross cluster EDRS.
yeah. So
yeah.
so that'll enable you to load balance multiple clusters basically. If you have to scale out, so it'll just kind of make management of the multi-cluster environment slightly more seamless and less management overheady. But yeah, so when I say it's a physical hard limit, it is a physical hard limit for you self-provisioning 60 nodes, but Autoscaler was still going to push you above that limit, but it's something that you will then need to remedy moving forward. It's not a place you want to be sitting in for too long. So yeah, from me, that was pretty much it. The stuff I've been seeing and working on this week. Now, there's quite a few. There's a good mixed bag of people online today, which is always good. So we've got some customer success managers. So these are the guys that kind of manage the relationship and help you to be successful and help you with any of your sort of business requirements around this. We have a number of GSS technical folks on there as well. So any of you feel brave enough to kind of step up and give us a heads up about anything you've seen or you want to discuss, or any questions you've got burning from the last couple of weeks that we can maybe help you with. And don't all rush at once. I know normally you all sort of jump in and you all try and talk over each other. But yeah, feel free to stick it in chat if you're not feeling very brave. But it'd be great if somebody would, yeah, just send us a question or ask a question. That'd be fantastic.
Hey, well, Ruth here.
Hey, Ruth.
This is something that you're probably aware of as well, and it's something that we're looking at the moment with a customer who is looking at Login Site. So just on how to actually set up a subscription based on the fact that they're an MSP. So we're looking at it at the moment. So hopefully for next week's call, we might have a breakdown of the easiest way of doing it. But just for any customers that are looking at it, there are a number of different ways of setting the subscription up. So it might just be worth noting that.
Cool. So this is as per a non-MSP, so a self-clouded customer rather than somebody that's got a cloud provided to them by a managed service provider. If we were to go into Login Site, for example, and we want to go for the paid version you talk about, right, over and above the. Of course, I've logged out. But you'll see the wonders of federated identity working now, so that's cool. So yeah, if I want to go for the paid version, so I want to do more than a gig of log forwarding and stuff like that, I would often see, if I'm a free version, I would see a banner up here, right, that says you can buy. There's a slightly different route if you're an MSP customer. Yeah,
it's
so
just I think an interface, basically it is slightly different, but we're just looking into it at the moment of what's the best way for customers to do it if they are changing from the free version to the paid version. So hopefully next week we'd have an update on that.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be good to run through actually. I was just going to jump into a cloud provider portal to see if I can see the same sort of thing that we're talking about. It looks like the one I have access to, though, already has Login Site provided. Sorry about that. I was just just coughing up a lung there. So yeah, it looked like I already had access, so I don't see the banner to buy the service, unfortunately. But yeah, no, that'd be good. We'd be able to take some people through. I think Renee Francois, you work with partners, do you not? Or am I mixing you up with somebody else there? There you
go. Yeah, I'm working with D2SI currently,
yeah,
and AWS as well. I have Teamwork and Soluseo.
cool.
These are the active current project I'm having with them.
Brilliant. Have you come across this before, where a customer of one of those SIs has wanted to go for the paid version of Login Site for Cloud, and then they've sort of ended up in a position where they think they bought it, not sure they bought it, that sort of thing? Or is that not something you've come across yet?
No, I never faced this yet.
Cool. Well, hopefully next week we'll have some information for you as well then.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Brilliant. Right. Anybody else feeling brave or want to tell me about something they've seen or come across in the last week or so? If not, we will do a bit of a usual round robin that we do with the architects. No worries. Okay, so let's start alphabetically at the top. So Asaf, how are you, fella? What have you been working on? Anything cool?
Working, but nothing unusual or exciting. I'm just getting to. I was assigned some customers, so.
So what are they?
Just
They kind of early stages, or have you inherited sort of existing running ones so far?
It's a mix. I have some that have been using the service for several months and are pretty established, and some interesting use cases. Some, it's just a DR, some it's an expansion, some it's total evacuation. So just kind of getting the lay of the land.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So I guess you've been doing a few sort of onboarding calls as well, then the initial setup stuff. I don't know. This applies to. This is a question for everybody actually. The kind of use cases that we're seeing right now, we're trying to look at enhanced use cases, I guess you could call them now. Now the service has been running for a good few years. We're looking into more things we can do, and the BUs are focused on what other services and what other mechanisms they can use to provide, whether it be better integration with some AWS native services or other use cases. And for myself and certainly a few of my colleagues, I know that we're mainly still seeing kind of data center evacuation, or it's kind of a compelling event like hardware refresh, that sort of thing. But primarily data center evacuation seems to be one of the #1 use cases for VMC so far. I don't know if anybody's seeing any different from that, or you kind of agree.
Yeah, I'd agree. I won customers doing a hybrid approach to start. I'm going to run that for a while, so they're moving a certain part of the application into the VMC and then leaving the other part on premise.
Cool. So actually splitting the application rather than moving moving a whole application, but only some of their infrastructure into VMC.
Correct.
And are those are they using any of the like native AWS services, for example, database services, anything like that, as part of that application, kind of partially transforming the application, or are they literally just uplifting some of it and putting it on VMC?
Yeah, it's mainly just moving some the application front end. They actually have the database on premise.
Cool.
And they're able to do that because they're very close proximity to the AWS data centers, so they got good performance.
Nice. I was going to ask you about that actually. If there was anything you were seeing around, anything you were having to do special, but to help with performance or any sort of latency impacts. But I guess because they're quite close, and I would imagine they're using one or more direct connects, that they're not facing any problems there.
Yep, they have 3 or 4 direct connects to each SCDC from on-prem.
Cool. So so application sort of migration. I guess that's maybe second or third in the list of use cases that we see. So the big ones are obviously data center evacuation, or compelling event like data center close or hardware refresh, that sort of thing. And then a landing pad, kind of a platform to migrate to as an interim before refactoring applications, whether it be partial refactoring or, like I said before, taking the database services and moving them into AWS native databases, or actual full-on multi-factor refactoring of an application and a complete rewrite in AWS native. And then DR is a big use case. So there's a number of things actually with DR that things coming down the wire, like the rapid provisioning. But at the moment, DR is DR is an interesting one because if you go for we talked about this the week before last, we talked about it where, if you look at a full DR scenario where you have everything kind of sitting there hot and waiting to be consumed, then it's not hugely different from having a physical data center somewhere else that you're paying for, that's hot and ready waiting to be consumed. But if you just have the bare minimum and want to scale up, then that's certainly one approach to take, but there's no guarantees then that you'll be able to do it in the same time frame, and meet your recovery time objectives, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's still a massive use case for us. Anything else that anybody's seeing that?
Yeah, I guess a related use case for what Zach mentioned, the network extension. I mean the data center extension or bursting use cases, especially for seasonal demands, or even for when customer ran out of capacity in their own data centers. So I guess VMC is a good choice for that extra capacity.
Yeah, good point indeed. So I mean, I've got a customer that's they're doing a project right now, and because of the kind of customer they are, as in the business that they are, they've actually run out of available network address spaces on-prem, and are having to kind of spin up massive amounts of VMC in an isolated manner, with as in isolated networks from on-prem, just so that they've got resource that they can deploy a huge new project into, which they wouldn't be able to do in the same sort of time frames. And they're consuming tens and tens of hosts worth of capacity, running in isolated network functions, which they could do in another data center, just nowhere near the same sort of speed to live, I guess. So yeah, so you sort of scale out, and extension is pretty common as well, I guess. Cool, right. So Fabio, you spoke up before and you talked about federated identities. Is there anything else you've been kind of looking at or working on of late that you want to share with us?
No, nothing so interesting. So I got a new customer, but we are still on the early stages. So we are discussing with the customer on how to connect their on-prem environment to the SDDC. So we are still really we've just started the conversation about that. So actually nothing, we don't know nothing about the customer, what they would like to achieve. And yeah, I'm mainly working on the other customer to solve the identity provider federation issue, and then just the day-by-day business with my old customers. So nothing so relevant.
And what sort of vertical, what business is that new customer in?
Oh, well, actually, we are still checking on that. We are working on that, so nothing that we could disclose. So we are really at the early stages, and so yeah.
Fair enough. So Saf, actually, you were just mentioning that that there's a partner of ours that have an interesting solution for DR, and something that it's a technology that we've been looking into ourselves, I know. But do you want to give us a bit more sort of information on it? Something you've been looking at?
Yeah, it's just some customers, especially for DR use case, if it's purely a DR scenario, then we have some limitation with the storage, basically, because it's vSAN. So you might, if you have a large amount of storage, you might actually use too many hosts that just for the storage amount.
Sure.
Which can render this kind of
it's an expensive way of doing it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So and like you mentioned, it is something that we're looking into as well, but we have one of our partners, Datrium, that actually has a solution that leverages their own storage technology on an EC2 instance that is then mapped via NFS to the SDDC. And then all the replications are done to that NFS data store. And then when you actually have a failure or want to test things, then you can consume some hosts on demand, and you can keep the minimum amount of 3-4 nodes as a pilot light on the SDDC. And they have an interesting use case where you can actually, during a recovery, can either retain things, some workloads on that NFS data store, or storage vMotion, some of them to the vSAN data store, for example, for tier 1 workloads. So it's an interesting scenario if cost is preventing a DR solution, a DR use case for VMC on AWS.
Sure, yeah. No, it's a good point. I think that there's a number of things that you'd need to take into account there, right? You'd need to take in, whether you'd have the resource and the time to spin stuff up and then migrate it into the vSAN data stores to get the performance that you might require. And there's obviously the risk that just because you want the hosts, cloud, the reality is cloud isn't limitless, and AWS may not have those hosts available in that AZ or that region for you. So yeah, but absolutely, there's a much like anything, right? DR is always a business cost decision, right? What can we afford to lose in the event of a failure, and what do we have to have running, and what kind of performance are we prepared to pay for, and what length of outage can we sustain for our business to carry on running, right? And I guess for quite a few companies, a week of outage is certainly more than achievable to recover from, and others, every minute costs millions, right? So they're the people that would be paying the big money for an exact replica to be sitting there waiting live. But yeah, this sort of Datrium and other providers that are doing something similar, yeah, definitely a very cost-effective solution for DR. Thanks for that. I thought I'd call on you and just get you to get you to give us a bit of background on that one. So it's worth knowing about. So Prasanna, what have you been looking at of late? Anything that's cool and new?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing more and more customers moving towards automation while consuming VMC right from day one, and even for day two operations. So I believe Terraform will also become a primary automation tool, or one of the primary automation tools with respect to VMC. So
we have a provider now, don't we, for NSXT in early access? Is it, or has it now been released?
yeah, it's still in early access, so it's available in GitHub, so anyone can try it out. We have some blog posts around how to compile and use the provider. So yeah, it's available as an early access, but yeah, should be available as a GA shortly.
Cool. I mean, I know that obviously there's a number of people out there that use for automation. They might be big VRA on-prem customers already, or may just be using lots and lots of different sort of scripting, Power CLI, community-based scripts, VRO workflows, that sort of thing. And it's worth pointing out, alongside the potential challenges of migrating all your automation to something new, like the CF manifesto we were just talking about, is things like VRA are not going to work exactly the same. It's fair to say, right, that it will work, but you're going to have to make some changes, for example. So VRA isn't able to create new networks, I believe, in VMC, not straight away, because there's no support for the policy API and reverse proxy. Is that correct? Anybody keep me honest there? I believe that's the case anyway. And also VRO can't be deployed natively in VMC yet, although there are potentially plans to do so. So yeah, it's just a word of caution, really. Is if you're using VRA on-prem, don't make the assumption that you can target a VMC-based SDDC and it work in the same way. We've got a couple of customers going through it right now, so we maybe do a comparison table on a future call. What works the same, what doesn't work, and what you then need to do to make it work in a similar fashion. I think that sounds like a fairly good topic to dig into. So if that's something you do want to see, please feel free to add a comment, and we can we can draw something up for you. Obviously, keeping with the alphabetical theme, Ricky, thanks for joining. Anything you've been looking at of late that's can give us?
Yeah, so one of my customers is also going down the DR route, and they are doing stretch cluster in one region, and they want to have a second SDDC in a different region, not stretched, with half the hosts. And we're kind of going over the pros and cons of that. They're very cost conscious.
Yep.
So, we're letting them know that I will save money, but the problem is going to be, if they do have a complete outage in that first region, we may not be able to spin a post fast enough for them. And are they willing to take that risk?
So again, that comes back down to that cost, cost
Yep.
over what you can afford to lose kind of conversation, right?
Yeah, so that's pretty much a big one right now that we're trying to figure out. And they're also going down the path of heavy automation, and they're really starting to look at Terraform right now as well. So, getting my knowledge up to that as well.
Cool. Maybe we'll do a bit of a demo on Terraform in the coming weeks as well. One of our colleagues, Nico Vibert, who has done a good few blog posts on it and has been helping. Has been working with you, hasn't he, Prasanna, on one of the customers trying to get the Terraform stuff working in early access. Maybe we can get him on the call and he can run us through what he's been looking at. So I think that'll be useful to people. Cool. Double Z, just you left, mate. You've had at least 15 minutes to think up something new.
Yeah, I haven't just starting to onboard some new customers. My other customers are kind of just chugging along. So I haven't had anything surprising for a while.
Do you are you
Fortunately
seeing?
or unfortunately.
Oh yeah, it's a good learning curve, isn't it? Really, when you get sort of problems occurring or things that we've not seen before. Are you seeing with your new customers? Are you seeing that they are potentially more educated about the solution and the differences to on-prem than your other customers who are now mature with the solution, or is it like going back to the beginning and starting afresh? Again, it's an interesting sort of area really, as I guess with any new technology, it's new for everybody, but the longer it's been around, people seem to know a little bit more about it and be a bit more au fait, even if they've not used it. So are you seeing that, or are you seeing that it's new to everybody still?
Yeah, it still seems like most people are not really familiar, not real strong with the platform, and the use cases and things like that. So I haven't noticed a huge difference in that since I've been on the team for almost a year now.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, maybe it's a good time to then point out from our YouTube channel then that there are a number of sort of videos that people can refer to, how-tos, demos, and even one of our old colleagues did a good whiteboard session, a lightboard session on the solution and what makes it up and stuff like that. And hopefully we'll have some more of those posted there soon as well. And one of our colleagues, Michael Kolos, who's a bit of a legend in the VMC environment, he's just written a couple of blog posts as well, sort of going over the how to onboard, what you need to think about, going into detail about sort of the gotchas that you may come across. So I will dig those out and I'll add them to the YouTube comments as well later on. So we'll have those for anybody watching there. You'll be able to find his blogs later as well. And I've just had a message from Asaf just calling me out that I haven't spoken about my customers yet, or anything I've been working on. So, which is not strictly true because I did open the call, but fair enough. I'm going to use the get out clause that all of my customers are highly secure and confidential, and I absolutely couldn't possibly talk about anything they're working on. No, not true. I guess I'm seeing the same as most of you guys are, where I've got some customers that are fairly mature now, and they're into the stages of expansion and consuming more and more of the service, and then trying to do new and wonderful things with it. We have one customer who's doing a fair amount of cloud to cloud migration work at the moment, And then I've got another couple of customers who are very new, very fresh to it, still looking for all the base information. So we're going back to basics and talking about, you know, the constructs of the customer-owned AWS account, and then the customer VPC and the shadow VPC, that sort of thing. So yeah, just a mixed bag really. Nothing too scary up front. Quite a good cross section of verticals. You know, finance, healthcare, government. So yeah, it's just some interesting stuff really. Hopefully, if I come across a really unique use case, which I'm sort of working on at the moment, and if they allow me to, I'll go into it in more detail in probably in a month or two's time once we've actually deployed it and gone through everything. But they're working with on-prem stuff that they kind of want to replicate in a cloud environment, and then have that going out through different gateways in different parts of the world, to simulate traffic from those platforms, and just to see the differences that different global versions of the same application may have different kinds of traffic. So yeah, I can't really go into too much detail, but it'd be an interesting use case that hopefully we can talk about later on. So getting close to the end of the hours call now. There's a few of you guys, attendees, still online. Again, no questions in chat or Q&A so far, so hopefully we are providing you with some good content. The fact that you're still online and you're still listening, hopefully you're finding it useful. Please feel free to add comments or questions. And as per usual, if there's anything that you've come across, you don't quite understand, or you'd like to see demoed or discussed in more detail, just reach out to us. You know, we're happy to. In fact, the more questions, the better, because if we haven't come across it, then it's a learning curve exercise for us, and we're all nerds and we like learning stuff. So yeah, please feel free to just drop stuff down, and we can go into it in more detail. But if there are no questions at this stage on Twitch or Zoom, then I shall bid you farewell. Have a good rest of your day, whether it be late or early for you guys now. And I shall speak to you all next week. Thank you all for joining and participating.
Thanks.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks,
Take care.
Will.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.